Hi everybody, this is Chris Johnson again. Today we're going to be discussing what is liberty. Before I begin to get into why I'm bringing this topic up, I want to get into why I got into this to begin with. Well, I originally got into some of the constitutional information, things that are being hidden from our public school textbooks. When you go into history classes and things like that, they don't teach anything constitutional-wise. They don't teach anything that we had in this country originally in any history classes, because now the public school systems under the communist rule that we seem to have in this country now are teaching evolutionary values under democracy, and democracy is not what we want at all. It's not what this country had to begin with, and that's what everybody thinks now. The saying goes that I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the democracy? No, to the republic for which it stands. One nation under God. Okay? There's a lot of things in that show what we originally were. But I went down this path of asking the question of what is liberty. After I had learned some of the constitutional values, I started to learn about the powers of the jury. About a year after I started learning these things, I heard of a guy named Ron Paul. Many of you who are watching this video might know who Ron Paul is. And his presidential campaign went through. I supported that. I went to the Ron Paul rally in Washington, D.C. I attended the one in Minnesota. And very interesting stuff that happened there. But what happened, and even though I support Ron Paul, and what I'm going to say here, I'm going to have a lot of people, I'm probably going to have 50,000 comments on this, and that's perfectly fine. People can whine as much as they want. I don't care. They've already been whining. It doesn't matter. The point is, even though I support Ron Paul, I think he's done a lot more to hurt the cause for liberty than he did to help it. And I will explain why as I go through this video. Now, the thing is, I got into asking the question, and oh, by the way, I was also attending grassroots grassroots classes for running a campaign. I was going to run for senator in Ohio at one point, and during my education into taking these classes, I suddenly realized that something was telling me this wasn't the cause of the problem. I wanted to make the most use of my time. I wanted to fight the root of the weed. I knew there was a problem in this country, and I wanted to fight it, but I didn't know where the root of the weed was. I wanted, my mom, when we were gardening, when we were little, she always taught us, if you're going to take out a weed, you pull it up by the root and take the whole thing out at once, because if you just crack off the stem, it's going to grow back the next day. So I thought, well, I want to fight this thing at its source. So as I was, my mind was racing for the next few months after I started doing this. That was in, I want to say, August of last year, August of '08, I started having these questions. A few months later, I think it was November '08, I was reading on the forums on a website called Break the Matrix. I was reading on the forums. You can check the forums for this topic, too, if you want to verify this. The guy had asked a question I had never thought of before. He said, why are we arguing creation versus evolution in a liberty-based website? And I got to thinking, I was like, that's a good question. I hadn't thought of that before. Why are we arguing this? Now, I've always thought creation evolution was a very interesting subject. I like to watch debates on them. I've seen tons of debates on the topic. It just really interests me. But, I got to thinking, does this have anything to do with liberty at all? Maybe it's kind of a waste of time. Maybe this is like, diverting from the topic. And as I investigated in this question as to what this actually means and to find an answer to that question, I discovered far more than I ever dreamed possible, and I found a whole deeper level to this, fight for liberty that everybody says, well, I'm fighting for liberty. Well, I found a whole deeper level to this that I had never even dreamed of before. And I found out that not only is creation versus evolution relevant, it is necessary. The question actually comes down to, it is an absolute fundamental question that has to be solved before the question of liberty can be solved. And I'll show you why. See, because the problem most people don't understand is that the problem is not really coming out of Congress. The problem is not coming out of the Senate. Most people think, oh, the problems are on these different parts in the political, the political hierarchy. No, that's not where the problem's coming from, and we'll show you where the problem is here. So, So why are we arguing creation versus evolution and liberty? Now, when I've gone to different forums, you can go to different websites. I went to quite a few different ones, like Campaign for Liberty. I used to live in Ohio up until this past year. and there was a place called Ohio Freedom Alliance, which is also, they're also corrupting liberty, and they've kind of hidden from some of this debate, even though I've asked them to participate in open debate. All of their leaders have refused to do it. They don't want the topic even discussed. And not about creation evolution. I just asked them the question, can we have liberty and not have God at the same time? It was just over that question. None of their leaders would come out and debate this, and then I started asking other people in the organization to do it. No one else would come out and do it either. I think we went through at least 20, only about, I would say 10 to 20 people maybe responded to what we were talking about, but all of them refused. Everyone else just ignored us. They didn't want to discuss it at all. And I thought, well, if it's a group that's fighting for liberty, why would they not want to discuss liberty? It's like they don't want to discuss the foundation of it. You see, it's like when Ron Paul started his campaign, everybody thought that they were united in the cause for liberty. No, they weren't. If they were united in the cause for liberty, when Ron Paul fell out of the running, the liberty movement would have been just as strong as it was then. But it's not. It has gotten weakened. It's divided into a bunch of different things because they were united under a presidential campaign. They were not. They were united under Ron Paul, not under a foundation of liberty, because nobody really discusses what liberty is. Well, that's what we're going to do today. And this is going to be kind of long. I'm going to make there's going to be a lot of video cuts in this and a lot of parts to this. So just be patient with me. Let's watch the whole thing and let's listen and think carefully, okay, over what I'm going to say. Now, like I said, I didn't think this topic had anything to do with it at first, but then I found out the truth later. I'm kind of going through my notes. I'm trying to stay on topic here because I know I have a tendency to get way off topic. So, this becomes the absolute most important issue. What is liberty here? Now, Abraham Lincoln said, "The philosophy of the classroom in one generation becomes the philosophy of government in the next." Very true. What you teach the children in one generation is exactly what government, your children will become the rulers of the nations, become the rulers of the state and things like that. They're the people that are going to be in charge eventually. So what you teach them, those values get passed on to the next generation. So I started asking, what is liberty? Now everybody keeps, eventually I was asking what is, I was asking what freedom was. It wasn't until later that I started asking what liberty was. I had a few people come to me while I was doing some research on this and say, well, you may want to stay away from the word liberty and use the word freedom. It's the biblical term freedom. Now I didn't think that would have much to do with it at first, but I decided to go ahead and look into it anyway. So I started looking up different definitions, and I found out that the definitions between freedom and liberty differed in quite a few areas. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it because there's a huge long list for freedom and a real long list for liberty, and some of the definitions actually counter-mesh. And a lot of people use them interchangeably. If anybody watched my video on reviewing the corrupted works on liberty by Tom Mullen, in his Return to Common Sense videos that I have on there, you can see where he was using them interchangeably too, and never even bothered to research the topic to find out if there was a difference. Well, I'm going to give you a few definitions, and I'll put them up on the screen here for you so that you can see them for yourself and read them. Now, freedom gets a whole, like I said, long list of definitions, and we're going to give you some of them. It says exemption from external control, interference, regulation, etc. Well, that means freedom could mean a lot of things, and it could include, that you would still have freedom under the law. That, you could have a law, but, you're exempt from external control. So you're exempt from the law. You see, it's almost like an immunity. It's not really what people are talking about when they talk about free will and those kind of things. So it says that freedom here is the power to determine action without restraint. That's another one. Well, you don't have any compass, you don't have an area, you don't have an anchor point. I'll get to that in a minute, what that means. It also, another definition I read was personal liberty. But that's an oxymoron statement, saying personal liberty. Well, what is liberty in general? Calling it personal liberty or individual liberty means it only belongs to one person, and one person's personal liberty can be different from another person's personal liberty. Well, that goes directly against our United States constitutional statements that all men are created equal. This is implying, when saying personal or individual, that one person's is different from another's, and you can't have that. You have to have an absolute standard if everybody's going to be created equal. So, it also says exemption from the presence of anything specified. What? That can mean anything. Exemption from anything? Just specify what you're talking about, and that's exemption from it. That's freedom.